Today we move into an interesting passage with Jesus because he was all nice and friendly when he got started. Remember back with the Beatitudes in chapters 3, 4, and 5. Blessed are they. And he had a lot of soft things to say. And then he kind of moved up to be harder on people and he expected more faith. And he would say things like, oh, you've little faith. And all of a sudden he starts training people how to respond in faith. And he'll get some people that are catching it, like the centurion, like the Syrophoenician woman. And he marvels that they're doing so well in their faith. He puts even his disciples several times to test, like walking on the water, or when he was asleep in the boat, oh, you have little faith, and trying to get them to catch up. He does this with the average person when he's teaching. He starts teaching about the law. He starts asking them questions. He starts dialoguing back with them. It isn't just a one-sided lecture. But things change after what we call the triumphal entry. Then he gets very aggressive. And he's getting aggressive basically also at the power structure of the Pharisees and Sadducees and all these groups. He goes after them and he's very, very terse. And we're going to get to that, to where we read over his language very passively. We have these pastors that read it very quietly or very, when he says, woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. He's very strong, and it's like he builds his anger. He gives them this figurativisms. He starts giving all of these allegories and things, and he starts talking about them, and you're like this, and you're like that, and he's like a man that does this, and you're like a man, and he really pushes their buttons. And this is after he's been, claimed as Messiah by the people, been inaugurated in through the triumphal entry. He also turned up the money changers and made them angry because he affected their monetary bottom line. He also told a parable that was just against them, the one about the husbandman, the owner who had rented out his field to the husbandman, and they beat the servants and later on killed the son. And his question was, what do you think the owner is going to do? And they said, well, he's going to come in and wipe out those evil men. They didn't realize that they were the evil men he was talking about. So he gets aggressive here. We're looking at 22. And he spoke to them parables, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king that had a marriage for a son. Now, this is the one where there's a marriage for the son coming up, and he wants to have everyone there. So he sends his servants out, and he prepares this dinner. He has the oxen and the fatling, and everything's ready, but people don't want to come, and they keep pushing it off. And they made light of it, and some of them went their way, one to his farm, another to his merchandise, and the remnant took his servants and entreated them spitefully and slew them. So this was very anger against this guy who's trying to get them into the goodness of his home, and he wants them to come in. And when he heard that, he was very angry, and he sent forth his army and destroyed the murders and burned up the city. This is a foreshadowing, by the way, of 70 AD. Because when you stop right here, you can see that this is actually what's happening, is that the city is going to be burned up. And so, because he could have used any other idiom like that, but setting it on fire is really a very, very dangerous thing. And then he told his servants, this wedding is ready, but they that were bidden were not worthy. They chose not to be worthy. It's not that they weren't worthy. They chose not to be worthy. Go ye to the highways, and to as many as you find, bid them to the marriage. Now that, to me, is he's speaking to us. Anyone. He uses the word anyone you can find, bid them to come to the marriage. This isn't Calvinism. This isn't choosing to say, I'm only going to talk to you and not to you. I'm only going to talk to you and not to you. It's open to everyone. And there was no pre-selection here. So this is the church also. We are the ones of the highways and hedges. So these servants went out into the highways and hedges and bid as many were good, both good and bad, to the wedding furnished for their guest. The good and bad, there's no good, but okay. Those that do good things and those that do bad things were able to come in. But when they got there, they found that one of them had not put on wedding garments. Now, you couldn't just come in your own. You had to come in special garments. And many times these garments were provided by the king, the master of the wedding. And this one man didn't have one, and he was cast out. Bind this man hand and foot, take him away, and cast him into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Once again, weeping and gnashing of teeth. He says this several times. He's the one who defines hell. We get all these people pushing against it, or trying to make light of it, try to say it doesn't exist, or it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. He's warning people of hell. And the Pharisees took counsel on how they could estrange him in his talk. They wanted to flip the script on him. They needed to get back the dominance of where they were. And we see them do this through the rest of 22. They come up with these arguments. They're trying to get back their esteem with the people to show how smart they are and wise they are. So they even get the Herodians in the game. And these were zealots, these people who wanted to take by force, wanted to release Israel by force. So you had the Pharisees that were all about the law. The Sadducees had their own philosophical viewpoints, no resurrection. And then you had the Herodians, which were zealots, and they were about just taking with force. So he gets the Herodians in there. And, Master, we know that you're true and honest, and you teach the way of God. They start smoozing him up, and he's like seeing this coming. He says, why tempt me, you hypocrites? He just flipped it on them. He knew what they were doing with their smoozing. And this is the one where they ask him about paying taxes. And should we give to Caesar? And they're trying to make him go against Rome. You know, they're trying to tie him into a circle there. And he goes, well, let me see your coin. And this is where he does the famous, whose inscription on it? Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. He flipped the script on him. And then here come the Sadducees, who don't believe in resurrection, but suppose a man had a wife. And then they tell the story of this man who supposedly had a wife. It's a fictional, hypothetical, who has this wife and didn't have a son with the first, didn't have a son with the second, didn't have a son with the third, went through 7 sons and never had any heirs. In the resurrection, whose wife will she be? I mean, this is the quintessential of the atheists who say, where was Cain's wife come from? And I can hear this, yuck, 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 I've got you now, yuck, yuck, yuck. And Jesus says, you do err, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. He flipped the script on him. You do err. You don't know the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of heaven. But in touching the resurrection of the dead, what say ye when it says, I am the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob? He is the God of the living, not the God of the dead. Flipped it right back on them. Jesus, their own God that they worship, which is not Jesus, of course, their own God that they worship says, I am, not I was. I was the God of Abraham, but he's gone now. And here comes some more Pharisees. And they heard, they heard that the Sadducees would put to silence. And they gathered together. And they went and sent a lawyer to ask him a question. And they're trying to trip him up again on theology. What's the greatest commandment? Oh, now you're going to pick one out of the 10 and say this one's greater than this one and create some sort of theological fight. Oh, this is better. This is the way it is. No, you're this. No, you're that. They're trying to create that. And he goes, well, love the Lord with all your heart and soul and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is to love your neighbors, you love yourself. These 2 commandments hang all the others, the law and the prophet. All of it hangs on loving your neighbors as you love yourself. But number 1 is loving the Lord with all your heart, mind, and your soul. And number 2 is loving your neighbor. Everything else falls under that. While the Pharisees were gathered against them, he started going back on them. When you talk about the Messiah, he was saying to them, whose son is he? Because David was the one who said, the Lord said to my Lord, sit on my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool. If David called him Lord, how could he be his son? He flips the theological back on them, and they couldn't answer. Many times when we're wise enough to flip the theology back on the person throwing at us, they can't answer. They can't answer the questions that they are supposing. Then he goes, here's where he gets into the tirade. In chapter 23 is nothing but a gigantic tirade against them. He actually calls them out by name. See, when I read this with the same zeal and the same emotions that I had from the Old Testament, I haven't shifted gears. I'm still reading this like I read Isaiah, or like I read Jeremiah, or like I read 1st and 2nd Samuel, letting the emotion of the text guide me through. He calls them out. The scribes and Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. They're standing right there. He's talking to the people, and they're standing right there. And he's calling them out. All therefore, whatever they bid you observe, but Do not ye after their works, for they say and do not do. They bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their little fingers. You know, they'll put them on your shoulders, this heavy burden, but they won't even move it with their little finger. But all their works that they do are seen of men. They make broad their phalanges and enlarge the borders of the garments. They love the utmost seats at feast and the chief feast and greetings in the market, saying, Rabbi, Rabbi. But you're not to call them rabbi, for they are not your master. That's what rabbi means, master. You have one master, even Christ. Christ is your only rabbi. Christ is your only master. And you are all brothers. There's not one better than another. When we think the pastor is better than us, the theologian is better than us, that is not true. We are all brethren. And so, and don't call any man father. And I know this doesn't go, of course, for your physical father, but okay, because people will call the religious people father. And don't call any man father, for you have one Father, which is in heaven. Neither be ye called masters, because one is your master, even Christ. You know, I noticed in history that even John Calvin would go by Master Calvin. He was Master Calvin. They would sometimes wake him up at night to make rulings because he was the master. They couldn't think without him. We are not to have masters. We have one master, and that's Christ. And the way to him is through this word. And if you're trying to get to him through anybody else, any theologians, any popular teachers, you're going to have a master. You're not supposed to have a master. Only one master. Whoever exalts himself shall be abased. He that humbleth himself shall be exalted. Then he does a lot of these things. He does a lot of these woe. Woe to you, scribe and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you've shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. But you don't even go in. You're shutting up heaven from men, and you're not even going in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You devour widows' houses for a pretense, and you make long prayers. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. You go about the land to make a proselyte, and you've made him twofold a child of hell. He's just really pulling out the stops. And they're sitting right there. This isn't him talking behind their back. He's making them madder and madder. You fools and blind. For which is greater, the gold or the temple? He's talking about how they'll swear by it and say, if you swear by the temple, that doesn't mean anything. But you swear by the gold, oh, then you've sworn by something. And so Jesus is telling them not to swear at all. And when you swear by heaven, swearing by the throne of God and by him that sitteth therefore. So you realize that they'll even make swearings to God, but don't keep it. But if they make swearings against the gold, you've kept that. You better keep that one. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and cumin, and you omit the weightier matters like law, justice, and mercy. They would sit there and go through little pieces of spice to make sure they got their 10%. Woe to you, Pharisees, cleanse first. Where he talks about, I'm sorry, I jumped up where, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you make clean the outside of the cup, but the inside is still dirty with extortion and excess. The inside is filthy, but the outside looks good. He even calls them whitewashed bones. They're sepulchres that look good on the outside, but they're filled with dead men's bones. That's what you are. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and garner them. And you said, oh, if we had lived in those days, we wouldn't have killed those men. You're admitting you're children of murderers of the prophets. You don't even see what you're doing. And you witness of yourselves. And it says, you serpents, you generation of vipers, how can you escape a damnation of hell? He's really calling them out. Wherefore I sent unto you prophets. Now notice this from the end of 23. He says he uses first person. I sent you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you shall kill and crucify. He's going to send them in the future. He's going to send prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will scourge with your synagogues and persecute from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous bloodshed from the earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, whom you slew between the temple and the altar. All these things shall come upon this generation. So he's talking about how he's going to create this group. He's going to send out this group of prophets and group of guides and groups, he says prophets and wise men, and instead of them accepting them. And that's exactly what happened in the church. That's exactly what happened after he died. With the birth of the church, this was fulfilled 100%. And this is very poignant here at the end of 23. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, all these things shall come upon this generation. But O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets and stonest them that are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered my children together, even as a hen gathers the chickens under her wings, but you would not. We're going back to Jeremiah there. What did he say? But you would not. He keeps going on to that. Behold, your house is left desolate. Whoops, that sounds a lot like Jeremiah here. And I say unto you, you shall not see me henceforth until you say, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. So you won't see me again until, now he says you're going to see me again. But you're not going to see me until you hear this. So this is a very poignant moment for him. And like I said, we have 2 more chapters, and I'll do that next time. But there's a lot of passion here. There's a lot of emotion here that we pass over simply to do application orientation or 5 verses at a time. And we miss the whole build-up of where this is going. This just gets faster and faster. I can see him just, woe unto you, woe unto you, woe unto you, woe unto you. Oh, how I would have called you. You know, it moves like this. Anger, 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 then sadness. How I would have called you, but you would not. This has got a lot of Old Testament to it. And when you read it in that vein, you see a lot of passion. Same passion that you saw in Jeremiah, you're going to see here. The passion and the pain right here. Thank you.